Hi, everyone. My name is Mike Emard. I'm the PM lead for Azure Files, and I'm going to be joined by my colleague Andrew Chen, who's the PM lead for Azure NetApp Files. We are going to talk to you about shared storage for enterprise file workloads. So Azure Storage has a broad portfolio of storage options. We have block storage, which is disks, object storage or blob storage, and then we also have file storage. And with file storage, we have two primary offers. That's Azure Files and Azure NetApp Files. And we're going to dig into those two in this session. So for the agenda, first we'll just talk at a high level about different file storage workloads. Then we're going to give an overview and talk about some TCO considerations for Azure Files. We'll do the same thing for NetApp Files. And then we'll talk a little bit about choosing between these two products. So file storage is used for a ton of critical enterprise application workloads. You have everything from general purpose team shares, SAP, VDI, databases, hybrid storage where people are accessing data from both in the cloud and on-prem, high performance computing workloads, and a lot of custom apps that people have built using file share services over the past several decades. So first we'll talk a little bit about Azure Files at a glance. So Azure Files is very easily managed. There's no operating system or hardware that you have to deal with. With just a couple of clicks in the portal or some API calls, you're going to get a fully managed file share. It's secure both in transit and at rest. So we do encryption over the wire for SMB and the REST protocol. We have encryption at rest in Azure, where you can even do customer managed keys. There's Active Directory integration. And there's a lot of different options for network security as well, including VPNs, firewalls, and private endpoints, where you can really lock these things down. Because we just do SMB and NFS, it's cross-platform. You can mount these shares from Windows, Linux, Mac, as well as we have a REST API for data services. You can access these shares from anywhere, so it's a great hybrid story. You can access the file shares from on-prem, from in the cloud, and we even have an on-prem caching technology that we call Azure File Sync. There's two different classes of storage that Azure Files provides. The first we call standard storage, and this is really hard drive-based storage. This is recommended for general purpose workloads. You're going to get tens of milliseconds of latency. For each share, you get about 10,000 IOPS, 300 megabytes per second. And there's a few different classes within standard that we'll talk about later, but your price range is going to be from about $0.015 up to 6 cents per gigabyte. We also have a tier of storage called Premium, and this is SSD based, and this is really recommended for performance sensitive applications. You're going to get 2 to 3 milliseconds of latency for small IOs. You can go up to 100,000 IOPS and 10 gigabytes per second of throughput. It's a provisioned pricing model where you starts at around 16 cents a gigabyte. And you can see the example applications here. This is stuff like databases, custom line of business applications, web content, anything that needs that low latency, high performance. So the way Azure Files works is, you create that share in the cloud, and then you can start connecting to it directly over SMB over the internet because this is encrypted traffic. Optionally, you can tunnel all that over a VPN if you wish. We also have Azure File Sync, which will synchronize an on-premise Windows file server with your cloud file share. Then your users and applications will access that data through SMB or NFS locally to that Windows file server. And then the Windows file server uses our REST protocol to synchronize up to the cloud. That is optionally configurable to go over a VPN if you like. And then we have NFS. The NFS traffic is not encrypted. We rely on network security for that. So you do require a VPN if you want to connect from NFS on-prem. And then, of course, from virtual machines and containers in the cloud, you can connect directly to your Azure File Share. So now we'll talk a little bit more about Azure File Sync. Azure File Sync will turn a local Windows file server into a copy of your Azure File Share. One of the great things about this is you can actually have multiple servers surfacing the same file share. We have cloud tiering as well, so you don't have to keep a full copy of all your data at each one of these local caches. You can determine how much local cache you want, and File Sync is actually going to track the heat of your data based on frequency of access and recency of access. It's going to keep the hottest data local, and it's going to tier the rest out to the cloud. Because you have a full copy of all your data in the cloud, that's where you do all of your backups. So you take your snapshots up there. We have integration with Azure Backup. You can set up retention policies and take daily, weekly, monthly backups. Azure Backup will manage all of that for you, as well as orchestrate any restores you want to do. And of course, you can do a restore from all those backups in the cloud. And there's also a disaster recovery for anything that might happen on-premise to one of those local servers. You can quickly get another server up and running because all of your data is in the cloud. And last but not least, with file sync, because you're just syncing to an Azure file share, there's native cloud access as well. So you access the files through SMB out through these local servers and also through the cloud Azure file share. There's a link down here at the bottom where there's a video, a lot more details about file sync. I encourage you to go watch that. As far as pricing, there's two different models for Azure Files. We have a premium tier, which is provisioned pricing. So you pay for the amount of storage that you provision, and you're going to get a certain amount of IOPS and throughput based on that provisioning. And then there's no transaction fees. Because premium is targeted at performance-sensitive applications that are doing a lot of transactions, this makes it easy so you don't have to think about how many transactions you're doing. Then we have the standard tier, where everything is pay as you go. So you pay for used gigabytes, and there's also transaction fees. And you can see that there's three different tiers, ranging from a transaction optimized tier down to a cool tier. Cool is really more for these active archive type of workloads. You can get a very low gigabyte price, but the transaction price is the highest for cool. And so you want to make sure you're picking the right tier for your workload. There's a link down here at the bottom with a lot more details on how you pick the right tier and optimize your costs with Azure Files. All right, so I'm flashing some customer testimonials up here on the screen. I'm not going to read them all word for word, but the main takeaway here is that Azure Files is used for a wide variety of use cases. Some of the ones we're showing here include hybrid. This is an Azure File Sync case where the customer said that the Azure File Sync has been life-changing for them, totally changed the way they're doing things. We have VDI. So Azure Files is actually the recommended profile storage for FS Logic's profiles. You can see that they're experiencing zero latency, as almost as if they're in the office. And we also have SAP deployments and database deployments as well. So a lot of different customers getting the features and performance they need out of Azure Files. And now I'm going to turn it over to Andrew to talk about NetApp Files.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you everyone for taking the time to join us today. I'm Andrew Chen. I'm the PM for Azure NetApp Files, and I'm really looking forward to spending the next few minutes with you on that product. So to get started, a little bit of background or context as to why we built Azure NetApp Files. So a few industry data points on the file storage in the cloud. One is the majority of enterprise workloads are actually still running on premises. And a second is that a significant portion of those workloads are running on file-based storage. In many instances, these are solutions that were architected decades ago, as Mike had indicated. That being said, incidentally, file storage is also still a rapidly growing space. So what are the challenges? We found that there are sort of three key issues that prevent enterprises from moving these workloads to the cloud. One is the combination of making the transformation of changing to the cloud plus replatforming applications to sort of PaaS or cloud native solutions such as object storage can be too much change or transformation for an organization at one time. And then two is many solutions require administration and operation of file servers, IaaS in the cloud, which is too much operational burden for customers. They want to basically eliminate that as part of their journey to the cloud. And third, and probably most key, is that they're unable or unwilling to give up on key capabilities that they've grown accustomed to over time in their existing solutions, such as data protection or HDR capabilities. And so what we've found is that customers are searching for a solution that will enable them to migrate these workloads to the cloud, but without having to refactor and without having to compromise. So it was with this in mind and to address this challenge that we've built Azure NetApp Files in deep partnership with NetApp, but as an Azure first-party service that is sold and supported by Microsoft. So a few key takeaways about this product to consider. Number one is Azure NetApp Files, or ANF, is sold and supported by Microsoft as a true first-party service. This is not a marketplace offering. One purchase from Microsoft provides all of the necessary components. There's no separate licenses, support agreements, or add-ons required from NetApp or any other vendor to get up and running. ANF appears as just another line item on your Azure bill, and your existing support agreement also applies to ANF. And if you have constructs such as an enterprise agreement, ANF consumption can be used against that. ANF is also a fully managed cloud service. So we've automated and abstracted away the storage administrative tasks, and there's no need to worry about any of the underlying infrastructure or management. This is also not a hosting arrangement, and you don't have to purchase any gear, make any CapEx commitments, or sign any long-term upfront contracts. You can be up and running in minutes. Azure NetApp Files is consumed truly as a cloud service and billed on an hourly basis. And just like any other Azure native service, ANF includes a variety of means of access, including portal integration, access from REST API, command line interface, PowerShell, and we also have an availability of SDKs and client libraries to help you deploy programmatically. ANF emits telemetry, metrics, and monitoring, same as any other Azure service, to provide a streamlined experience. Azure NetApp Files is built using the power of NetApp's Data ONTAP, the world's #1 storage OS with a very deep install base. And NetApp is the market-leading NAS vendor in enterprise external storage, hosting many of the most critical workload deployments on premises. This comes with a rich portfolio of complete and proven data management services, protocol support combined with high performance. And finally, but very important, security and enterprise readiness are very important. And so through leveraging the best of both Azure and Microsoft, as well as NetApp, we offer multiple critical capabilities in this area, which we'll illustrate in the next several slides. So let's spend a few moments on architecture. Azure NetApp Files is singularly unique in the industry. There is no combination of enterprise storage technology and public cloud that is more deeply integrated or performant. Other offerings in the market may appear cosmetically similar. For example, many other vendors have near-to-cloud managed systems and offerings, which are their systems typically in a colo site connected over a WAN technology and possibly charged using an OpEx model. But what we've done with Azure NetApp Files is far more sophisticated and superior. Azure NetApp File systems are physically hosted inside of the Azure data centers and operate within Azure security boundaries and fully to Azure principles. For example, principles and guidelines such as just-in-time and just-enough access, using specially secured workstation, and also only authorized personnel. All resources involved in delivering ANF require security software, and all code down to the firmware is extensively scanned. These are only a few examples of how Azure NetApp Files has been hardened and truly delivers enterprise-grade security, and is also demonstrated by the fact that we're able to operate Azure NetApp Files in the Azure government region, something that's very unique for this type of offering. The underlying architecture and experience is also extremely Azure consistent. You can perform control plane functions through all of the typical means of access. For example, again, portal, REST API, command line, PowerShell. Under the hood, Azure NetApp Files has its own resource provider that communicates with peer resource providers to coordinate critical functions such as deployment and provisioning, with its own orchestration engine that acts as a virtual administrator for the entire fleet. Azure NetApp Files is powered by top-of-the-line bare metal systems that have been configured, deployed, operated, and are maintained to best practices. This fleet of systems is connected directly into the Azure internal high-speed software-defined networking through new networking technology that was built first for this offering, but has since been used for other Azure services. The ANF systems and network layer securely routes data plane traffic directly into your own private VNet for highly secured access at very low latency and with full line rate performance. So a little bit on the key product attributes of ANF. Azure NetApp Files offers 3 tiers, each with a different price, performance, capacity combination to provide flexibility and to address various workload needs. Additionally, we offer manual quality of service pools, which gives you the ability to have greater control in allocating performance and capacity separately to volumes in your deployment. We also offer the ability to both resize as well as change the tier of the volumes live while serving data and without requiring data copy to give you the ability to adapt to changing demands. ANF delivers high-end performance with minimum sub-millisecond latency, maximum IOPS up to 460,000, and maximum throughput of up to 4.5 gigabytes per second in a single volume. The performance of ANF is most convincingly demonstrated through the fact that it's achieved certification for SAP HANA database and log volume deployments. We also offer key capabilities that are needed for high-end workloads, including 4.9's SLA, support for SMB NFS version 3, as well as NFS version 4.1 protocols, and also support for simultaneous multi-protocol access to the same volume. We also offer data protection capabilities, including performant and space-efficient snapshots, granular restore, and replication. Finally, we also offer several key security capabilities, including both data at rest and in-transit encryption. ANF also possesses a range of compliance certifications, including ISO 27001 and 27018, HIPAA, HITRUST, SOC Type 2, IRAP, FedRAMP High, and Government IL4 and IL5 certifications. So I'd like to thank everyone for joining us today and also invite you to learn more about Azure NetApp Files. You can go to aka.ms/netapp to find out more and also request access to the service. And before I turn it over to Mike, back to the beginning when we had talked about workloads and customer success, I'd like to leave you with a short video which has customers in their own words explaining some of the success and benefits they've seen from deploying Azure NetApp Files in their environment. So thank you very much.
SAP is the world leader in enterprise software. With ANF, we get scalability and flexibility, which is important for businesses to run and have a faster time to market for their products. We are able to deploy environments almost 30 to 40% faster. We are able to reduce the total amount of outages by 80% because of the stability that ANF provides. Customers are looking for flexibility, stability, and a better TCO.
HANA Services is the IT systems hub in North America for close to 100% of the bottling business.
Data was critical because historical patterns were not valid anymore. Consumer patterns changed, retail patterns changed, and our people needed to react to those.
KONA's operations relies on data. As business expanded, we had to add 2 nodes every 3 months. Our strategy was simple: run fewer number of nodes, which mean lower runtime cost for our big SAP investment.
We have delivered millions of savings, but also millions of growth based on the Azure NetApp environment.
Most traditional reservoir engineers might get through 1 run a day. I can now run hundreds of runs a day.
Azure NetApp Files was a lifesaver here. We have seen amazing performance increases. From simulations that took over a month, now are taking a few hours.
With Azure NetApp Files and Windows Virtual Desktop, we moved to a remote workforce over the course of a weekend. Azure NetApp Files has made us more resilient and ready for anything.
All right, now we're going to talk about choosing between Azure Files and Azure NetApp Files. Most workloads that require file storage are actually going to work well on both of these services. So it's really about finding the best fit for your particular workload. Now, there's a few rules of thumb you can use. If you are a Windows file server user on premise, you're probably going to be best off on Azure Files, so I would look there first. Similarly, if you're using NetApp on premise, you're probably going to end up on Azure NetApp Files, so I would look there first. On the Azure Files side, if you need flexible data access, being able to connect directly to the cloud, access from on-prem, including caching with file sync, you're probably going to end up with Azure Files. If you need like ultra performance, you're probably going to end up on NetApp Files because it is the highest performing of these two, especially in terms of latency and IOPS. In terms of protocols, both Azure Files and Azure NetApp Files support both SMB and NFS. One unique thing on the Azure NetApp File side is you can actually do dual protocol access to the same share. So you can have one share and access that same data over both SMB and NFS. On the Azure File side, if you create an NFS share, you can only access that data through NFS. In terms of redundancy, Azure Files has GRS, ZRS, GZRS, as well as LRS. On the Azure NetApp File side, it's an LRS offer, but there is optional replication of snapshots to geographically paired regions. So you do have a GeoDR story there. In terms of tiers, Azure Files is unique on the hard drive-based storage tiers. for those more economical type of workloads, where you can get pricing as low as 1.5 cents up to 6 cents per gigabyte. Azure Files also does have a premium tier, the SSD based, at 16 cents a gigabyte. On the Azure NetApp Files, the tiers are all SSD based. There is a standard, premium, and ultra tier, starting at 15 cents per gigabyte for standard. You're going to get different IOPS and throughput depending on which tier you choose for ANF, but you're going to get low latency for all those tiers. And in terms of maximum performance, Azure Files is maxing out with a latency of 2 to 3 milliseconds for premium files, 100,000 IOPS and 10 gigabytes per second of throughput. And NetApp Files has the ultra tier with sub-millisecond latency, 460,000 IOPS and 4.5 gigabytes per second of throughput. And this really allows some unique workloads to run, such as SAP HANA scale out. So if you are really latency sensitive, you need a lot of IOPS, Azure NetApp Files is going to give you that performance. If you're very throughput bound, then maybe it's Azure Files. All right, so there's a lot of links to learn deeper. This was a pretty quick session. So I encourage you to explore these other links, and I thank you for spending time with us today. Much appreciated.